Did I make this video just to add fuel to the literal flames? Yes. Yes, I did. Okay, Stampede's over. We do not need the hat. I've lived in Edmonton for almost a decade, and I've put up with Calgary every time I visited. So despite my obvious bias, I'm going to try to objectively compare their light rail transit systems. But as always, I am not an expert, so if you have any disagreements or anything to add, put it into the comments. This is also going to be based on where the transit systems are at in July of 2024. I'm going to give a quick overview of each of them and then give them points for cost, speed, frequency, accessibility, vastness of service, innovation, safety, and ridership. So adding a couple categories from last time. So first off, we have Edmonton's light rail transit system, or the LRT, run by the Edmonton Transit Service. It consists of 3 lines: the Capital Line, the Metro Line, and the recently built Valley Line. The trains run from 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. and fun fact, it was actually the first city in North America to build a light rail system back in 1978. Next we have Calgary's LRT system, or the CTrain, which is run by Calgary Transit. It consists of 2 lines, the red line and the blue line. The trains run from 4 a.m. to 1 a.m. except during the Calgary Stampede, which just happened, when they run 24/7. So let's get into the comparison. A single fare in Edmonton is currently $3.50. The transfer time is 90 minutes, so if you're connecting from one place to another, you have 90 minutes to do so. There's also the ARC card system, which lets you load up a card with tickets, day passes, U-passes if you're a university student, and monthly or yearly passes. These are the current fares for those. They kind of vary based on the age range that you're in. The ARC card itself is $6. I will say that the ARC card is fairly new, so there's still some kinks that need to be worked out. A single fare in Calgary is $3.70 for an adult and $2.50 for youth, 12 to 17. Children under 12 ride free on both systems. Calgary doesn't have a centralized system or card where you can load passes and tickets, so you have to buy them individually. The monthly passes are also about $10 to $15 more expensive than in Edmonton. One really cool, mildly cool thing about Calgary is the free fare zone, which started in 2022 and is supposed to last for 5 years. This is a section of the LRT network in the downtown core that is completely free to use, which makes it easier to travel within downtown Calgary. This video isn't sponsored by TD, but the free fare zone in Calgary is. Calgary fares are more expensive almost across the board, and they also don't have a centralized payment system like the ARC card. However, they do have the free fare zone. I am going to give the point to Edmonton.
Okay, I think in hindsight, this point actually goes to Calgary. I made the argument that Edmonton fares are cheaper all around, but I think that the free fare zone adds a lot of vibrancy to Calgary's downtown core and offsets the other costs being higher.
The next category is speed. There's not a lot to say about this because both systems have an average speed about 30 kilometers an hour, so neither of them gets a point. Next, we have frequency. Both trains run at about 15 minutes apart at their slowest. However, Calgary's trains run a little bit faster during peak service at 3 to 5 minutes apart compared to Edmonton's 5 to 6 minutes apart, so Calgary gets this point. Next, we have accessibility, and fortunately for both cities, their stations and trains are accessible with a variety of ramps, priority waiting areas, and elevators. A feature that Edmonton has over Calgary is a more extensive pedway system in downtown, which connects various buildings without having to go outside. Edmonton and Calgary both have extremely harsh weather in the winter, so this definitely makes it easier to get around. So for that reason, the point goes to Edmonton. It's a brand new day, but I'm going to jump into vastness of service for the next category. Edmonton has 3 LRT lines, 29 stations, and around 37 kilometers of track. Calgary has 2 LRT lines, 35 stations, and around 48 kilometers of track. Calgary's lines are also longer and have more stations, but Calgary is also a little bit bigger of a city than Edmonton, so that's not necessarily a completely fair comparison. The Calgary Airport and Chinook Centre are 2 big areas that aren't accessible via the LRT system, but Calgary is closer to getting its LRT to the airport than Edmonton is. Edmonton has 1 more LRT line than Calgary, but the western expansion of the Valley Line is still under construction, so there isn't a lot of eastward or westward mobility. which notably means you can't get to the West Edmonton Mall, which is one of, if not the biggest attraction in Edmonton. The Edmonton International Airport is also not accessible via the LRT, and there are no approved plans to connect it yet. Calgary is currently building its new transit line, the Green Line, and both cities are expanding upon their current lines, so this category will probably see a lot of change in the upcoming years. That being said, I am going to give this point to Calgary. I think once the westward expansion of the Valley Line finishes in Edmonton, Edmonton will improve a lot, but then also the Green Line in Calgary, once it's finished, will probably put it literally miles ahead of Edmonton. Speaking of expansion, our next category is innovation. Both cities are building new lines and also expanding upon their current lines. Edmonton's Valley Line incorporates sustainable urban integration, which incorporates transit expansion into existing communities in a way that is livable and pedestrian friendly. A big part of this has been improving the bike lanes, and Edmonton is a leader in this area and has been investing a lot into this type of infrastructure. This not only makes the LRT easier to use, but it also helps maintain a sense of community in a city that is fairly car-centric, as most are in North America. Edmonton is also very communicative about its transit planning and does a good job of engaging with the public. I say this as someone who has gone to provide their input on municipal transit planning in Edmonton. One last thing I want to talk about for Edmonton is its investment in hydrogen technologies and hydrogen fuel. Alberta in general is a powerhouse when it comes to energy technology, and not just when it comes to oil and gas. There's so much potential to develop technology that reduces emissions in this province, and so it's nice to see this being incorporated into our transit. Calgary has also been working on their climate strategy by diversifying their buses to include electric buses, hydrogen buses, and renewable diesel. It has a long way to go in terms of connectivity between the bus and LRT networks, but it has been improving. Calgary is behind Edmonton on the construction of its third LRT line, but the plans are very promising. Both cities are steadily innovating and improving their transit, but I am going to give this point to Edmonton. Our next category is safety. This one's actually kind of difficult to compare because there's a lot of data out there about crime on transit, but none of it is standardized between the two cities. Some data being reported quarterly, some's year to date. One city will include nonviolent crimes, one won't. So expect these numbers to have a large margin of error. In the first quarter of 2024, Calgary had 51 assaults, while Edmonton had around 140 violent incidents, 80% of which were personal violence. Again, the terminology isn't consistent between the two cities, and this doesn't even begin to get into nonviolent incidents, but in general, Calgary does seem to have lower rates of crime. I've included a bunch of data in the description if you want to look at it, including reports from the Edmonton Police Service and Calgary Police Services themselves. In terms of perception of safety, around 75% of Calgarians felt safe riding transit compared to around 62% of Edmontonians in 2023. However, both systems did see a decline so far in 2024 compared to 2023 in terms of their violent crime. This is because of a series of measures, including increasing the presence of officers. Both cities are also building addiction centers and debating other measures such as adding turnstiles. I know that hearing these statistics and hearing the stories on the news does seem scary, but both cities do seem to be taking transit safety seriously, and perceptions of safety do seem to be trending upwards in both cities. I did this in the last video, but I do also want to mention again that you are still significantly more likely to get injured or die in a car than on a train. But with that said, the point for this category goes to Calgary. Next we have ridership. All of the previous categories have been somewhat theoretical, but how many people actually use the LRT systems in both of these cities? In the first quarter of 2024, Edmonton had a ridership of around 85,000 per weekday, while Calgary had a ridership of around 290,000 per weekday. This is the number of rides taken on the LRTs, not the number of people using the transit, and not including bus rides. Adjusted for population, in Calgary, one ride is taken daily for every 5.7 people, compared to Edmonton, where one ride is taken daily for every 19.1 people. So basically, more rides are taken on Calgary's transit relative to their population than in Edmonton. Calgary's CTrain has also returned to pre-pandemic levels, while Edmonton's LRT is still at around 70 to 75% of what it was before the pandemic. Edmonton's bus ridership is actually greater than Calgary's despite being the smaller city. the best network is much more extensive, but unfortunately I'm only looking at the trains, and so this point does go to Calgary. Unlike with Toronto and Montreal, Edmonton and Calgary are both very similar cities and have somewhat similar transit, so it was a lot harder to declare a winner this time. But unfortunately, Calgary does win by a small margin. If you disagree with me, then I understand. I wish I disagreed with myself.
I will say that Edmonton is a smaller city with less funding and is still managing to do some really cool things with their transit. This video is by no means me trying to bash either city, and if you do have the opportunity to use either transit system, then I definitely recommend you do so.
I filmed in a couple of other cities since filming this video, so take your guess as to which city I'll be riding in next. There are some clues on my Instagram if you want to follow me over there. Videos are going to be somewhat sporadic for the rest of the summer, but subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you haven't checked out my last transit comparison video, you can do so now. And with that shameless plug, I will see you next time. Bye! Man, at least we have the better hockey team.